Welcome to An Awful World, but not awful like you think.
This is the show where we discuss whether we would have discovered important advances in a world exclusively full of Haylies and Libbys. I'm Haylie.
And I'm Libby. And today
we're talking about prisons.
Prisons. You want to know what the worst thing about prison was? The Dementors. We couldn't talk about prisons without bringing up Prison Mike.
That's right.
Obviously, that's a requirement. So, prisons. Let's talk about it.
Prison hella old.
Prison is hella old, which I didn't know. Like,
I mean, it has to be.
It just makes sense, right? Like, since the dawn of time. Well, not since the dawn of time. Yeah, I know.
Since like 1000 BC.
Yes. Yeah, Mesopotamia and Egypt, we know for sure had prisons. Interesting, not interesting. I mean, interesting, but not surprising. That's what I was looking for, is they used to be like really shitty, you know, like real bad.
Dungeons.
Yeah, like dungeons, and you'd be like chained and be like super isolated. I think like in Rome, they were like small, underground, like really dark, like dank places.
Yeah, and they were just like chained to the wall. And in Greece, they were just like chained to wooden blocks.
Yep. And so something that I think has definitely changed a lot over time is this like idea of like reforming people or rehabilitating them to like re-enter society.
Yeah.
And that definitely is a very new idea that was not around then, which is why they did things like chain people to walls or wooden blocks.
Yeah.
Because there were really only two reasons for you to be sent to prison.
Which were?
To await trial and then be let go if you're found, you know, not guilty or however they did it. Or you were held there until they killed you. Capital punishment. So not super great.
No.
But that's why they didn't really care about the conditions, because they were just like, well, this is just the holding period for you.
Yeah.
Like either you're going to go home or we're going to kill you. But and probably the second one.
And sometimes they were just like tortured there. So they were kind of like, yeah, we like that it's inhumane.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of the point.
Yes, it was the point. It was more like punitive.
Yes.
Than it was rehabilitative, if you will.
Even though, as Jake Peralta says, prison real bad.
So real bad.
It's still punitive.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it definitely is. And we'll talk about that some, about how it is in the United States now. But in the early, I think like 12th century or 11th century is when the Magna Carta, you know, is introduced to the world. And that's like, kind of like a cornerstone of like human rights in general. And so that's when the focus started becoming like, okay, we need to like reform prisons somewhat. And that's, you know, essentially how we got to like the modern prison by like the 18th century. But again, the 18th century.
That's not long ago at all, you know?
Yeah, that we're coming up with a quote unquote modern prison.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So basically, death or slavery. I think I mentioned like, you're awaiting trial, but also like slavery was a big thing.
Yeah.
That you would just be like indentured to the state of wherever you are.
And it's still like that here in the United States.
Like they did a documentary about that on Netflix called Fear the 13th in reference to the 13th Amendment.
Right.
Which abolishes slavery. So it's very interesting. And it's about how modern prisons are really just like state sanctioned slavery.
Yeah, it 100% is.
Yeah. So anyway, earlier in this season 2 of An Awful World, we talked about serial killers.
Yes.
And psychopaths.
Yes.
And I think, if I recall correctly, that we determined that there would be some psychopaths among us.
Yeah, there would have to be.
So,
because I think sometimes that's just like a mental
it's just like chemical
thing.
Yeah, it's just how your brain is wired sometimes for some people. And like, that's not to say that like, and I'm sure I said this then, that like all psychopaths are bad people, because that's not the case.
No.
There are a lot of people who are psychopaths clinically who just like don't go and murder people. You know what I mean? They're just like, they don't feel empathy the same way that other people do and whatever.
Yes.
Doesn't make
so
you
they
a
might
bad
be
person.
jerks, but they might, but they're not like murderers.
Right. Exactly. Yes. That's what I'm trying to say is like a psychopath maketh a murderer or not. So, I feel like we would definitely have to have some kind of prison.
Yes.
For people because we just can't let those people just like be in society after doing something super egregious.
No, but I don't think that it's going to be like what prison is today or what it was back then.
No.
I don't think we're chaining people to walls.
No, that's inhumane.
I don't think we're torturing people or leaving them underground. You know, I think having them a little more isolated just in the way of like, you're in a prison, which is isolating you from the rest of society.
Yeah.
And like, maybe that's down the road a little bit, not so far in the city in case you got out.
Right.
Kind of a thing. But not like we're here to torture you because you did a bad thing. Right. Kind of a thing. Unless someone was like a pedophile, then you know,
pretty much in every world, pedophiles should be tortured.
Yes. I don't know who's doing that torturing because
we don't have the stomachs for it.
No.
Torturing people? Yeah, definitely not. Well, I wonder because in my head, I think, and I'd like to believe that it would be more like rehabilitation focused.
Yes. And
like trying to get people to understand like the consequences of their actions and to, you know, make themselves better people and then re-enter society so that they can be like good contributing members of society.
Yeah.
But I don't know how quickly I would come to that conclusion. Like part of me wonders if I'd just be like, ooh, person did bad thing. Now person needs to be separated from society, at least to make them not able to do that bad thing again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it would vary on like the bad thing though, because if someone just does like a normal bad thing, then like, I don't know, like theft, I don't think I would be like, you need to be separated from society.
Yeah. And part of me wonders though, like how much crime would there really be in an awful world?
That's true.
Beyond like, obviously beyond, I don't want to say like beyond murder, because obviously that's the worst crime. Yeah. But I mean, do you think we have people who are like kleptomaniacs?
Probably, because again, I think all that stuff comes down to like mental things.
Yeah.
And I think that like, I feel like a lot of those things just are mental. And so you would have to work them out in some way in a prison or something. I feel like our prison is going to be therapy.
I mean, yes.
You know?
This is so hard for me to think about because we are such rule follower type of people.
Yes.
That I cannot imagine even like trying to like shoplift.
I feel like that's going to be something that like steal bread for your family to like live kind of a thing.
I mean, yeah, you know? That's such a moral ambiguity for me where I'm just like, yeah, you should do that. Yeah. Like if that's what you need to survive, then yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, where do you draw the line, you know, between, because I do think that a lot of people like, some people maybe shoplift for necessity, but I think a lot of people shoplift for the thrill of it.
Yes.
Of like, I'm not going to get caught.
Yes.
And so it's like, ooh, I'm going to get this thing that I wanted that I'm not going to pay for it, whatever.
Yeah.
So I just like wonder like how much of that, I don't know. Like I couldn't do something like that if I tried. Like I couldn't shoplift.
Yeah. I just think that like, you know, if you're like mentally not in the right place, anybody could.
For sure.
You know, it's something that's easy and it's not really like
hurting anybody.
Yes. And so if you need to act out in some way, that's a better way to do it.
That's true.
You know, than hurting somebody or yourself. So I think something like that. And then there's clearly just like, because of mental disorders, genetics, things like that, there are going to be people who are like narcissists or abusers or things like that. I think that's really going to be where our prisons lie, is mainly for like violent crimes.
Yeah. Not like petty theft.
No, I think that like maybe someone who is like a kleptomaniac and they're just like stealing everything in the whatever, we might be like,
something's wrong with you.
Yeah. But again, I think that we're just going to be like, hey, maybe you just like hang out here and like talk to some people for a while. Like, we're not going to hurt you. But I do think that like we need to figure out what's going on with you.
Right. For sure.
But I don't know. Cause I just feel like why in the past were people like, let's like torture you or chain you up until we have court to decide what's going on? Because me personally, it feels like my first thought is, well, why would you do that?
Well, so I think this is complete speculation because I haven't done any research on that sort of thing of why was it so punitive to begin with. But I think it probably is attributed to a couple things. One thing being men.
True.
And I know that sounds like, oh my God, you're going to blame everything on men. But really, it's like that funny quote from Family Guy where he's like, name one bad thing that men have done. And don't say, and it's, this giant
and it's
list
like everything that they've ever done.
Things. Yes.
Yes.
And so I think that part of that, and the reason I say that is because it's like, I know we talked about in like our serial killer episode, like rape. Rape is almost exclusively a, male on female or male on male crime. It's very rarely perpetrated by a woman.
Yes.
For a lot of reasons.
And not that it can't, but it's just rare.
It can be. Yes. It's just, I would say probably 98% of the time it's perpetrated by a man.
We're the less aggressive species.
We are. And also, like, some people don't understand that, like, okay, why would like a straight person like rape somebody of their own sex? And it's because it has to do with power. So I think that's kind of a similar thing, that being able to torture somebody and have that kind of control over them, that seems like something that a man would do to me.
Yeah.
So that's number one that I think it's attributed to. Number two is religion. I think religion for thousands of years was the scope by which people looked at all of life, including government and, and punishment, prison, whatever. That's a part of like a governmental society, whatever, is that we're going to have rules, we're going to have laws. And if you break those, we're going to do bad things to you. Yeah. Basically. So I think that's probably largely why it was so punitive, especially like Old Testament type of like, an eye for an eye type of people saw it that way. I know that in Muslim culture, that's still very much, it's like, I don't know how much it happens in the Middle East today, but I assume to some extent, like if you steal something, we're going to cut your hand off. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just one of those things that I think just comes with sort of like a religious type of society. Yeah. And I'm not really sure like when the turning point was for us as society.
I do think that a lot of times it's like, people don't want to look at the underlying issues. It's very much like fear to control. Exactly. And it's like, think about parenting and like, oh, well, I'll just hit my kids to control them. Right. And then it's like, but that doesn't solve the problem. No, all you're doing is teaching them, don't do this because you get hit. Right. Not don't do this because
it's wrong.
Yes, exactly. You're not looking at why they're doing that and telling them why not to do that. To me, it's the lazy way to do things.
Get your point across.
Yes. And it feels like the lazy way to do things for a prison as well. I agree. Because again, like, yes, it's easy to say, well, don't do this because we'll beat the shit out of you and lock you away. And so people are like, oh my God, well, I won't do that. Right. But also like, there's a reason why people would still do that, even if that's the repercussion. Right. And also like, you're not telling them why they shouldn't do that. Right. And you can just, like murder, you can't, why is it's bad.
It's wrong.
It's morally wrong.
Yes.
But some people, if they are like a sociopath or something, they don't care. Genuinely might not understand, you know?
That's for sure. I think too, like, I'm just, well, I have a couple of thoughts running through my head, so I feel I need to like sort them out for a second. But like one thing I was thinking about is like in religion, a lot of times they try to use fear to control people. Yeah. So especially like I can remember as a kid being scared to death of like the church that my grandparents went to. They always put on an Easter play. And in the Easter play, they have like Jesus being crucified, right? And, you know, I don't know how much you know about the story of the crucifixion and all of that, but there are two other men that are being crucified at the same time as Jesus. And one of them, like, before he dies, you know, accepts Jesus and goes to heaven. The other one does not and goes to hell. And so there was always a scene in the play where the one guy is like dragged to hell.
Yeah.
And I remember being so scared of that I was like, well, I have to be a Christian and I have to believe, or like this terrible thing's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
What I'll say about that is also that I've done a lot of research over the years, and like I took death penalty class in college and all of this, and it's not a very good motivator or deterrent for things.
Yeah.
So like prison as it was, you know, 100 years ago, even, was not a good deterrent for people because it didn't teach them anything.
No.
It's just like, we're going to put you away for this period of time. And then especially it gets to be a big problem when we let people out, because you think about somebody that went to prison in 1990, 35 years ago. Think about them coming out into the world today.
And it's so vastly different.
It's unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we have cell phones and we do everything on cell phones and we access the internet constantly. And, you know, just there's all this crazy shit that you would have to familiarize yourself with.
Right.
That would be nuts. We don't prepare people for that.
No.
When they leave. And then, you know, I think some people think, well, if I just reoffend, at least I know where I'm going to end up. And at least I know I'll have a place to sleep.
Yep.
I'll have food. Like, I really do think that some people, that is genuinely how they think about, you know, prison or jail. So it's a thing that it's not a good deterrent. It never has been. And just in our conversation about prisons, I also think we should talk about the death penalty.
Yes.
Because capital punishment is a huge part of our prison system.
I wrote down death penalty. Guillotine! Guillotine!
Oh, Haylie has been chanting about guillotines since approximately November 6th.
I don't know why. It just like...
Yeah, just something random happened that day before that just, you know, really swayed her,
you know,
beliefs into reinstating the guillotine, which, you know, the guillotine was like last used in France in like 1970 something.
Yes. Also, did you know that the guillotine they used it because they considered it a very humane way to kill someone.
I think it probably is.
Because it's fast.
Yeah, it's fast. And I know there's been lots of research done on like how long are you truly conscious after your head's been cut off.
Yeah.
And like there's so many different competing theories about it. I think it's like nerve endings that make people like blink and, you know, like twitch or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But, you know, some people are like, no, you're alive for this many seconds after. I'm just like, I don't know. Your brainstem has been like severed.
Yes.
I don't, even if you're alive, you're not conscious.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So I can understand where the French may have thought that was a humane way to die. What's not humane is
everyone watching it.
That and the electric chair.
Yeah, that's rough. I don't know.
So inhumane to me.
Yeah.
And that was like the preferred method in the United States until the
like
70s or 80s.
Time.
Yeah. Long time. Well, super inhumane.
And then they're like, how about a firing squad?
Yeah. And they're like,
I don't think we need that.
That's
extreme.
A wild idea. Are you guys okay?
Yeah.
Like, you're just drunk on power over here. Like, let's come up with the craziest ways that we can like murder somebody else. And also, I'm just always of the opinion of like, I am not God, so I'm not going to play God and like take somebody's life. And even if they took another life, which I know a lot of people are like, you would feel differently if, and I'm like, yeah, maybe I would. Like if my family member was like murdered by someone, would I want them to like be put to death? Oh, it's such a complicated topic.
It is.
And I took a whole class on it in undergrad and I loved it because it was so fascinating. And they did all of these, like we talked about all these studies of like, you know, the executioner's guilt. And also like, it doesn't tend to make people who are impacted by that crime feel better.
Well, yeah.
Because it's just like, okay, well, now the person's dead.
Yeah, now they're just gone.
Okay.
But they were already in jail, so like they were already not going to be able to do anything to anybody else.
Right.
You know, well, I mean, other prisoners,
Yeah.
but like, you know, they weren't out on the streets anymore anyway.
Right.
So it's not like you're getting that person back for anything,
Right.
you know?
They're still going to have to spend the rest of their days, you know, in jail.
Yeah.
In prison. And I think like, I want to be perfectly clear about like my stance on the death penalty, because obviously I'm very anti-death penalty. I'm a candle holder for this. And I'm really disappointed because this year we executed the first person in Indiana in probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And this man, we studied everybody on death row when in my undergrad, everybody on Indiana's death row, not everywhere, because, you know, Texas has like 500 people or something insane. But, there were only like 9 or 10 maybe people on death row in Indiana. So we were like able to get ourselves pretty familiar with those folks. The person that they executed this year was incredibly mentally ill, incredibly. And I think it's really disappointing and like upsetting that we put somebody like that to death, because I don't believe that person should have been released back into society. Unfortunately, I think he was ill enough that he needed to stay in a place like that where people would be safe from him. But he also needed help.
Yes.
You know, he needed mental help really, really bad. And instead of giving that to him, we just decided to throw his life away like it counted for nothing.
Yeah.
And I just can't get on board with that.
Yeah.
I just can't.
No. And it's not like bad people don't contribute to society.
I think we've talked about this before. Yeah. I've told you about my popsicle stick violin story, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my professor for that class was a post-conviction relief attorney for people on death row in Indiana. And someone on death row had made her, she kind of put money on his books, like on his commissary, so that he could buy stuff. And he bought a bunch of popsicle sticks and glued them together and sanded them down. And he made her the most beautiful violin. And it is amazing. I mean, it looks like something that was genuinely like woodworked by one of you two. Like it was beautiful. And so the point of her like bringing that in was to show us that like these lives still have value. They're still able to contribute in ways. And nobody's arguing like that they should just be released back into the world to like, you know, have unfettered access to vulnerable people. But we shouldn't put them to death either.
No. But I mean, also like think about history and think about all the like scientific discoveries and things like that we get because people are terrible.
From really bad people. Yeah.
Like a lot of scientific advancements come from war.
Yeah, that's true.
Like think of all the scientific advancements that came from like
something
the Nazis.
Really bad.
You know, like
the Nazis took us to the moon.
Yeah. Like, but just terrible people have terrible minds. And so they do terrible things to people, but
sometimes good stuff comes out of it.
Yeah. They figure stuff out because of it. And while, they're like torturing people and like doing these things, they are learning from it.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? So again, it's not that these lives are not valuable to society as a whole, but they also shouldn't be where they can affect society.
Right. They represent too great a threat to just be allowed in society without any, you know, limitation.
Yes.
But their contributions to society may still, you know, exist and count for something. And, you know, and so like we went through it all in that class about, you know, what are the main arguments for people that are pro death penalty? And so a lot of people say that it's cheaper than putting someone to death. That's
and it's not
true. It's not true. So most people who sit on death row, the people in Indiana who are sitting on death row have been there for over 20 years. You still spend a long, long time going through the legal system because our legal system is designed to give you many opportunities to, you know, not have that be the last. You have a lot of chances for appeal in a death penalty matter because the stakes are so high because it's your life, right? So people will sit there for 20 years. They have like death row prisons are just like nicer. Like they just have they have TVs sometimes and things like that. Like they're kind of living a little high on the hog. And the amount of money that it cost us to buy the drugs that we use as a concoction to put people to death is absurd. And for a while, we were getting it from places in Europe who stopped selling it to us because they didn't like that we were using it for that because it's inhumane.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's an interesting topic to talk about, and it got kind of wrapped up in the prisons episode, I guess. But I don't think that there would be any kind of capital punishment in an awful world.
No.
And I wish there wasn't any in this world.
No.
But there's another problem.
Yeah.
Which is prisons are overcrowded.
Yes.
And apparently that happened like last century because as people became more like urban, like urbanization of cities, there are more people. If there's more people, there's more crime. There's more crime, then there are more people in prison.
Well, also, I feel like a lot of that comes after the Civil War. There's no slavery anymore, so then they put people in prisons because then you can still have slave labor,
right,
or something like that. Like, think about the wildfires out in California, and then they're certifying these people to prisoners to be firefighters while they're out there, but they're making $1 a day, which is slave labor, 100%. But then when they get out of prison, if they survive these fires and make it out of prison, then they don't actually get like a legitimate certificate to be a firefighter, and they're not allowed to be them because they were prisoners. And they were convicted. But they're literally sending them into these dangerous wildfires because they're like, well, we just need bodies.
Right. Yeah. And that's
so
incredibly problematic.
And it's 100%, like here in the States, at least. I mean, who's the majority of who's in prison?
Black people. Yeah.
And who commits most of the crimes? It's not Black people.
No.
It's just not.
Yeah.
So we're still using it to this day as slave labor.
Yeah.
And people are just totally fine with that.
And to oppress a certain, class of people.
Yes.
And
100%.
a certain type of people.
100%.
And I think, even in the last 30 years, it's gotten particularly bad because of the war on drugs, which is something else that we've talked about this season, and substance use and abuse. And I think that's such a contributing factor to overcrowding of prisons. And because I think a lot of marginalized communities are more impacted by substance abuse, that is also correlated to the reason why there are so many people in prisons who are members of a marginalized community. And so I have long held the belief that those people are in the wrong place.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, using drugs should not be a crime.
No.
Because it's you that you're hurting, ultimately. Now, if you're going to do some crazy shit, and a lot of people do while you're using drugs, like, stealing or whatever.
Or like armed robbery or something. Yeah.
Obviously, yes.
Then fine.
Yes.
But that's more about what you did while on drugs rather than being on drugs.
Right. The kind of help that you need, though, if you're a person like that, cannot be found in a prison.
No, again, it comes with like therapy and like rehab and things like that.
Yeah. And so
not,
those people don't get to like properly detox, and, they're more likely to relapse. They're more likely to reoffend, all of those things, because we're not focusing on rehabilitating them and making them members of society again. And, also, this is so tough for me because the knife cuts both ways with certain types of people. Let's say felons, just felons broadly. If you're a felon and then you are released from prison and you're trying to get back into society, that's going to close a lot of doors for you, unfortunately, in terms of like job opportunity, where you can live, where who you can associate with.
Well, you can still be the president, though.
Well, I can't even.
Can't work at Baskin Robbins, but you can be the president. So I make that make sense.
I can't, and I don't want to. It's not what I selected, but I digress. But that closes doors for a lot of people that have committed crimes. And I do understand that some of those people are not rehabilitated, and they are going to reoffend whatever their felony was before. But a lot of those people, I think, could really benefit from having some sort of reentry assistance.
Yes.
To be able to, become contributing members of society. But it's like people are shocked when a felon is released from prison and the only place they can work is McDonald's, where they're making $7.25 and they can't live anywhere because they're felons and they're near schools and they're, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
And then it's like, oh, well, they end up going where all the other felons are, but then you're not supposed to be hanging around other people who are felons. Like, what do you expect these people to do?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And like eggs cost $7
right.
and that's 1 hour of their work
right.
and they can't feed their family and pay rent
right.
and do all of these things. And where do you want them to go? So what do you want to happen in this situation? You want them back in jail. That's what you just set the system up to be.
In some situations, they want to be back in jail.
Yeah, because they're like, it's just easier.
It's easier. It's easier for me to survive in here.
Yeah, they're like, I have a bed, I have a warm meal, there's heat, there's air conditioning.
Right.
I have water.
Yeah.
Well, I got nothing else.
Right.
Yeah.
Because which is just really sad.
It is really sad. And especially like the things that people are in jail for right now.
Oh, I know.
Fucking stupid.
I know.
I mean, again, if you are committing violent crimes, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But some things, come on.
I know.
Like, maybe there needs to be like 2 types of jails,
right.
or something. But like, this is ridiculous,
right.
I think. Well, and it's not like, yes, now prisons are set up to, are technically supposed to be rehabilitating people, which they're not. But so Fort Wayne is where I am from. A couple years ago, they ruled that the jail in Fort Wayne is inhumane, and that they needed to completely redo it and like rebuild a new jail because it was so inhumane. They were like, it's so disgusting in here that even prisoners don't deserve this. And I'm like, well, prisoners are just people.
Right.
And a lot of times they do have mental disorders that are causing them to do these things, or this was their last resort.
Right.
Kind of a thing. So maybe if we set the systems up in better ways.
Yeah.
These people wouldn't have ended up here in the first place.
But it's also one of those things where it's like, again, it cuts both ways because it's like, it's so fucked up that where do you even begin to reform it? Because then, if you're saying, the jail in Fort Wayne is so inhumane. Okay. In the meantime, where do we put all those people?
Yeah.
What do we do with them? Like, there are some really logistical concerns that come with that. But also it's like, it's something, worth like looking into. It's like how I feel about the like foster care system and, DCS. They are so messed up. I don't know how else you would fix it except burning it all to the ground and starting over.
Yeah.
And so logistically, that's impossible. It can't be done.
Yeah.
Because there are people that would be left hanging in the balance and, that's not ideal either.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's one of those things that definitely cuts both ways. I do at least think that it has gotten a lot better over the years than it was before.
Well, definitely. But I also think that like, how fascinating is it if, so the jail in Fort Wayne, they said it is inhumane to treat people this way, which, what that tells me is the people who are working there and the people who are running that, if it wasn't a jail, if they were doing that to like their own family members, they would be put in that jail for doing that.
Yeah.
But instead, they're being paid to do that to people.
Yeah. Well, and here's another issue. Corrections officers are not paid a lot of money to put up with some of the shit they put up with. Because while those people are still humans, people in jail can act like animals.
Yes.
Because I've watched a lot of 60 Days In, which is a great show. I highly recommend, where they send regular people into jail and follow them around. And there's a lot of wild shit that goes on in jails. And so those people, they don't get paid very well for what they do. But also I think it's a situation of a lot of people who, want those positions are seeking it out because it's easy for them to, abuse vulnerable people. So that's another layer of a problem to it. It's just like, it's just turtles all the way down. You know what I mean? It's just,
I know.
it's problems on problems on problems that I don't know how well it could be reformed. But
I think what happened, the way that you fix that is having better systems put in place outside of that, outside of the prisons to start, like having better systems to make sure that people have access to food, like having social security programs, having better food stamp programs, things like that, having minimum wage be higher than what it is, those kind of things. And then once we have things set up like that so that people aren't going to jail for stealing or for drugs and things like that, once people aren't going to jail for those kind of things, then we focus on the jails and make them more about like actually rehabilitating and not slave labor and not overcrowding and things like that. But unfortunately, the systems are all messed up.
Yeah, because they're all related to government.
Yes.
And like
the system is corrupt.
It is. It's part of the problem too. I think I've just like talked about this before, is like systems like that. Like government isn't necessarily designed to sustain people in that fashion. You know what I mean?
No.
Once we, as communities of people move towards having government, and then it's like, oh, well, government's going to take care of like our, poor and our, whatever citizens. It's not necessarily the best, because now we've moved away from that idea of community, where it's just like people used to just help each other out that were in the same community of people. It's like, oh, that's my neighbor. So like, I have to help them. And instead of like, oh, I have to rely on the government to help them, because government is just so problematic.
It's problematic.
It's absolutely Bo Burnham problematic because people abuse power.
Yes. And the issue is it's like, okay, you have if you're small communities, you have communities, they help each other out. And then the thinking, I assume, originally would have been like, well, then people will just kind of step up into positions to help in this community. And then that's what becomes government. And then we set up those systems and we all pay in to help these systems. And that becomes taxes.
In an ideal world.
Yes. And then we're all helping each other. But now there's so many people on the earth because we're overpopulated. And too many bad people have gotten into power and set up the system to be so hard. And then nobody trusts anybody and it becomes a whole thing. And then we've all spiraled out of control. And that's how everything is the way that it is. And while there are people who genuinely are trying to help and make systems better and trying to make prison where you rehabilitate it and where people have food stamps and the elderly have Medicaid and, like people can go to the doctor, and we're all just, there are people who are trying to set up these systems like that and make government work and be good. But
it's an uphill battle.
It's an uphill battle because what is my favorite slogan? People are bad. They just are. And I swear to God, for years, everybody's like, no, the majority of people are good. I'm like, they're not. People are bad. The end. There are good people out there, but the majority are bad. And so we're constantly having to dodge that. And I mean,
you and I have different opinions on that.
I know.
You know that.
I know.
I think that
Libby is the beacon of hope. And I think
that there are a lot of good people in the world. I think, unfortunately,
it's like 25%.
The bad people are talked about more. They are put in the spotlight more. They are in power. And that's so, when you control the information, you can do whatever you want with it. And I know that it can seem like every time you turn on the news or whatever, it's just like, oh, it's just more bad people doing bad things. I get that. But I do really think for the most part that a lot of us want the same thing. And I don't know, you just be interested sometimes to sit down with somebody who is has a completely different political ideology than you and ask them something like, well, are you cool with gay marriage? And they're like, well, yeah, why the fuck wouldn't I be? You know what I mean? I've had those interesting.
They're not.
Well, but some of these people that I've talked to are fine with it. That's not the hill they're wanting to die on.
Ugh, I know people, and that is the hill that they're willing to die on.
I know. It's going to be be both ways, though. That's what I'm saying. But
and I'm just saying, in that situation, there is somebody who I know who was like, ugh, gay people. I just don't want to even picture it. Talking about their family member. And I was like, well, are you picturing all your straight family members having sex? Because I think you're the problem here. That's disgusting.
Right.
Stop picturing your relatives fucking. Like, that's disgusting.
I mean, for sure. Yes.
You're the gross one, not being gay.
There are people like that for sure. I'm just saying that I have had a lot of conversations with people who do not align with me politically, who are very much more centrist than you would think.
The issue is bad people fuel good people to hone in on their bad thoughts and become bad people.
I mean, maybe.
Bad people fuel bad people, and the world is becoming worse and worse. So we need more prisons.
No, we don't.
Actually, we need to reform the prison system.
Throwing more prisons at the problem doesn't solve the problem, right?
Anyway.
Yeah.
In an awful world, we'd be like 80% good people.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of 25%. Like we currently are.
I have my thoughts on that, but I don't think I need to state them because I think it's pretty clear how I feel. But yeah, I don't think I'm definitely not like creating a world where that's the thing and that's how we treat people, because that's just not what I believe.
No, I just don't think we would have ever been like torture chambers and chaining people to walls. I don't think we would have ever done that. I think we would have just immediately been like, whoa, why did you murder this person?
Yeah, this is weird. Let's talk about it.
Don't murder me. We'd be like, whoa.
What are you doing?
What happened here?
What are you doing?
Why are you doing that? Should we talk about it? I mean, maybe we talk about it in a room with nothing in it so that you can't murder me. Or we talk about it in separate rooms through a little window. But
not torturing.
Yes. But
and I
just separate a little bit.
I think like even watching a show like 60 Days In and watching these normal people who are not criminals talk with these people who are quote unquote criminals, and they just realize like, oh, well, they're just human like me.
Yeah.
Like they're just a normal person like me that just, did something they shouldn't have or had a bad set of circumstances or whatever. So I think that's how it would just be from the beginning. I don't know how much othering there would be in an awful world of like, you are bad because you are not like me.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
No, I think it would just definitely be a lot of us sitting down and trying to talk about things and be like, let's figure this out and
try to,
let's count to 3 when we're this angry.
Try not to do that.
Yeah.
But
if you keep doing it, then we will put you away.
We're going to have to remove you from the situation.
You're going to just have more therapy.
Yeah. And you're probably not going to re-enter society if you're a person that's constantly murdering other people. Can't have that, unfortunately.
Yes.
So I don't think I have anything else to say about prisons. I think I've said my piece.
Yeah, I think so too.
So, well, thanks for joining us on this kind of dark, heavy episode.
Yeah.
That I wasn't expecting. So if you would like to hear about a specific topic, check us out on patreon.com/anawfulworldpodcast. We have a little place there where you can let us know what you'd like to hear or hit us up on Facebook or Instagram. Check us out, subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. And until then, we hope your day is simply awful.